Hello, welcome to the Self Learning Platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we start Unit 13 Civil Disobedience and Satyagraha. Our topic is Theory of Civil Disobedience and Existential Philosophy. The theme of alienation drawn from the existentialist philosophy is an important aspect of contemporary theories of civil disobedience. Albert Camus is considered a leading contributor in this area, although both Albert Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre and other existentialist thinkers believe that there is no valid basis for any moral or political authority's claim to validate or legitimacy or to obedience. Camus was more forthright regarding his views on resistance to oppression. He was of the opinion that respect for the dictates of justice must precede respect for law. In his Nobel Prize address, Camus strongly advocated his refusal to lie about what we know and resistance to oppression. He was not even averse to the use of physical force, although he always regarded it as a supreme evil. To counteract the worst violence of the state, he considered every power, elite, and authority of the state as the enemy of justice. He considered pacifists as bourgeois nihilists. Our next topic is Gandhian concept of civil disobedience and Satyagraha. Mahatma Gandhi is considered to be the leading theorist in the history of civil disobedience movement. The Gandhian concept of civil disobedience and Satyagraha is the greatest contribution to mankind in our time. Albert Einstein said, "It is my belief that the problem of bringing peace to the world on a supranational basis will be solved only by employing Gandhi's method on large scale." Martin Luther King Jr. said, "From my background, I gained my regulating Christian ideals from Gandhi. I learned my operational techniques." Gandhi called his concept of civil disobedience as the doctrine of Satyagraha or tooth force. For him, the adjective civil in the phrase civil disobedience referred to peaceful, courageous, and a civilized resistance. To him, the concept of passive resistance is inadequate to grasp the full implications of the concept of Satyagraha. He said that one must not only resist passively the injustice and arbitrariness of the government, but also must do so without any feeling of animosity. In the early phase, Gandhi had spoken of passive resistance as an all sided sword. He said, "It blesses him who uses it and him against whom it is used. Without draining a drop of blood, it produces far reaching results. Given a just cause, capacity for endless suffering, and avoidance of the violence, victory is a certainty." Subsequently, Gandhi abandoned the term passive resistance and chose the term Satyagraha. The concept of Satyagraha is divided of any feelings of hatred and violent means. It is based on spiritual purity. Like Tolstoy, Gandhi was opposed to all forms of violence in his commitments to political action. Arenas, a leading Christian on Gandhi, has stressed Gandhi's constructive imagination and uncommon ingenuity in finding and applying morally acceptable form of political action. Satyagraha, the unique system of non-violent resistance to the government's arbitrary methods and actions, is indeed his greatest gift to mankind. For Gandhi, ahimsa or non-violence and the truth were inseparable. He said that ahimsa is the means, the truth is the end. Gandhi used Satyagraha as a lever for social movements. In order to understand the Gandhian concept of civil disobedience and Satyagraha, it is desirable to know Gandhi's view on the subject in detail. Gandhi said Satyagraha largely appears to the highlighted in the analysis has a positive as well as negative connotation. In its negative form, the lawbreaker openly and civilly breaks and quietly suffers the penalty for their breach. And in order to register his protest against the action of the lawgivers, it is open to him to withdraw his cooperation from the state by disobeying such other laws whose breach does not constitute moral turpitude. In my opinion, the beauty and efficacy of Satyagraha are so great and doctrine so simple that it can be preached even to children. Gandhi strongly advocated that it was the birthright of every individual to offer civil disobedience in the face of unjust laws. He wrote in 1920, I wish I could persuade everybody that civil disobedience is the inherent right of a citizen. He does not give it up without ceasing to be a man. Civil disobedience therefore becomes a sacred duty when the state has become lawless, or which is the same thing corrupt, and a citizen that barters with such a state shares in the corruption or lawlessness. In his evidence before the Hunter Commission that was constituted by the Government of India to inquire into the disturbances in 1919, Gandhi argued that the civil disobedience would be called for and is legitimate even in a democracy. He highlighted its constitutional aspect in his reply to the Hunter Commission as to what we avoid have towards the breakers of the law if he would have been a governor himself. Gandhi replied, if I were in charge of government and brought face to face with a body who entirely in search of truth were determined to seek redress from unjust laws without inflicting violence, I would welcome it and would consider that they were the best constitutionalists, and as a governor I would take them by my side as advisors who would keep me on the right path. Some people have questioned the efficacy of Satyagraha as a universal philosophy. Gandhi's vision was not confined to the attainment of independence from the foreign rule, the control of the government by the Indians. He struggled for the Indian soul, not merely for a visible polity. In the concept of civil disobedience and satyagraha, both civil disobedience and satyagraha are deeply interlinked as a theory of conflict resolution. Gandhi said, experience has taught me that civility is the most difficult part of satyagraha. Civility does not here mean the more outward gentleness of speech, cultivated for the occasion, but an inborn gentleness and desire to do the opponent good. These should show themselves in every act of satyagraha. This new orientation of the concept has provided a visionary dimension to the very approaches of the conflict resolution in statecraft. The present threat, indeed, to the very existence of mankind could only be removed by the Gandhi approach of a revolutionary change of heart in individual human beings. The basic aim of every political system is to create a social, political, and economic climate in which the individual can fulfill inner requirements of their continuous moral growth. The Gandhian method of civil disobedience and satyagraha alone helps in creating conditions in civil society whereby all spiritual values and methods could be appreciated in the state system as a vital necessity for progress and prosperity. Dr. King very successfully implemented this Gandhian method during the civil rights movement. He said, a just law is a man made code that squares with the moral law or the law of God. An unjust law is a code that is out of harmony with the moral law. In the language of Thomas Aquinas, as unjust law is a human law that is not rooted in eternal, I and natural law. Any law that uplifts human personality is just. Any law that degrades human personality is unjust. All segregation statuses are unjust because segregation distorts the soul and damages the personality. Gandhi emphasized civil disobedience to imply non-violence. Non-violence, as it is highlighted in the analysis, has a positive as well as a negative connotation. In its negative form, it implies non-injury to any living being. In its positive form, it means the greatest love and the greatest charity. In Buddhist literature, it is highlighted as an attitude of creative coexistence. According to Henry Thoreau, if there is a conflict between higher values and lower values, then the citizen in no way should resign his conscience to the legislation of the state. He said that the legislators, politicians serve the states chiefly with their heads, and as they rarely make any moral distinctions, they are as likely to serve the devil without intending it as God. A very few serve the state with conscience also, and so necessarily resist it for the most part. No undue respect for law is required, as it will commit one to do many unjust things. Where immorality and legality come into conflict, the only obligation which I have a right to assume is to do at any time what I think right. What I have to do is to see at any rate that I do not land myself to the wrong which I condemn. The Congress Party organized the civil disobedience movement in pursuance of the resolution on independence passed in the Lahore session of the Congress in December 1929. It was a result of the British refusal to accept the Congress demand for dominion status. Factors such as the Lahore conspiracy case, the tragic death of the Jatin Das in the jail in 1929, the Meerut conspiracy case also forced the Congress to demand independence. The, The civil disobedience movement got manifested in various forms, such as the widespread defense of law, boycott of British goods, withdrawal of support by the army and the police, and non cooperation with government. Gandhi highlighted all these demands in his letter to the government in 1930 to break the SALT law. Gandhi started his Satyagrah movement in South Africa. Subsequently, on his return to India to lead the non cooperation movement against the British administration, he used it to remove the grievances of the oppressed workers and peasants of Champaran, Kheda, and Bardoli. To quote Gandhi, to speak of Satyagraha is to speak of a weapon which refuses to be limited by legality, challenge, illegality, and action. There are so many keys with which Satyagraha is equipped. For though Satyagraha rejects violence, it does not renounce illegality. Gandhi always emphasized the value of proper means. To him, improper means result in an impure end. One cannot reach truth by untruthfulness. Truthful conduct alone can reach truth. Non-violence is embedded in truth. Often Gandhi has been taken to task for his emphasis on self-suffering and satyagraha. Some trace it to the streak of masochism in the character of Gandhi, while others have gone over to Hindu scriptures to emphasize Indian spirituality. But the Gandhi approach to self suffering and satyagraha has little to do with the individual self mortification. It is a simple condition for the success of a cause. It does not imply that there would not be any suffering in the struggle for satyagraha. It simply means the assertion of one's freedom and one's right to dissent. This method often works as a psychological way to change the minds of an opponent. Gandhi said, while in passive resistance, there is a scope for the use of arms when a suitable occasion arrives. In Satyagraha, physical force is forbidden even in the most favorable circumstances. Passive resistance may be offered side by side with the use of arms. Satyagraha and brute force, being each a negation of the other, can never go together. The Gandhian concept of Satyagraha is the product of his faith in religion and spiritual values. He was convinced that the supreme law that governs all living beings and universe is nothing but love and non-violence. And Gita carried this message of non-violence as soul force. The Gandhi concept of Satyagraha is not merely an instrument of conflict resolution or non-violent resistance to injustice. It is an integrated concept covering the whole life process of a Satyagrahi. It includes truth, non-violence, chastity, non-stealing, savdeshi, fearlessness, bread labor, removal of untouchability, and so on. Civil disobedience is a branch of Satyagraha. All Satyagrahas can never be civil disobedience, whereas all cases of civil disobedience are cases of Satyagraha. Gandhi said its root meaning is holding on to truth, hence, truth force. I have called it love force or soul force. Now, our next topic is civil disobedience in practice. The Gandhi concept of civil disobedience and satyagraha has relevance in contemporary world. Rabindranath Tagore reflected the voice of generation when he said Gandhi was a living truth, a symbol of humanism. Gandhi used the civil disobedience method for the first time during his march to Transvaal in South Africa in 1913 to protest against the discriminatory policies of the South African government. This was the first real mass movement of civil disobedience led by Gandhi. Gandhi was not interested in embracing the Smoot's administration. When he found that Mr. Smoot was in trouble, he called off one of his projected marches. Commenting on this action of Gandhi, Louis Fisher, a leading journalist, wrote, in the end, Gandhi had not won a victory over Smoots. He had won Smoots over. In 1918, Gandhi used the civil disobedience movement in India during his campaign for the textile workers of Ahmedabad. The Salt Satyagraha of 1930, the civil disobedience movement for independence in 1930, and his fast unto death for the development of social conditions of untouchables in 1939 are some of the examples of the civil disobedience movements under the leadership of Gandhi in India. The people of South Africa used the Gandhian method of civil disobedience to demand the independence from the colonial administration. The civil disobedience movement against the apartheid policies of the South African government in 1952, in Johannesburg bus boycott in 1957 and 1960 march under the leadership of the Chief Albert J. Luthuli against the Savrlil massacre are some of the historic mass civil disobedience movements. The civil disobedience movement by the Buddhist in South Vietnam against the American bombing was inspired by the doctrine of nonviolence. The other historic examples of civil disobedience movement were the movement against German occupation in Denmark and Norway, Danilo Dosili's strikes in Silesia in the 1950s, nuclear disarmament campaign in Western Europe, the non-violence demonstration in Poland and Vorkutu prison uprising in 1953 in the erstwhile Soviet Union, the Montgomery Civil Rights March in 1955, and the anti-Vietnam War march towards the army base in Oakland in 1965. The civil disobedience movement is gaining momentum day by day throughout the world. Now let us sum up the unit. The anti-Vietnam War civil rights draft resistance, anti-nuclear weapon movement, and a host of other movements in Western Europe, USA, and in other parts of the world have given rise to a lively debate about the civil disobedience strategy in a democratic setup. The issue is being debated and discussed from various angles in different parts of the world, and also its relevance in contemporary international system. Although there has been a significant volume of conservative opinions that would not tolerate any opposition to the laws that have been democratically passed by various state systems, there is also a considerable opinion of well reasoned persons in favor of the Gandhian concept of civil disobedience movement. John Rawls, in discussing the concept of civil disobedience movement in a contemporary democratic setup, said, "The right to make laws does not guarantee that the discussion is rightly made. And while the citizen submit his conduct to the judgment of the democratic authority, he does not submit his judgment to it. And if, in his judgment, the enactments of a majority exceed a certain bound of injustice, the citizen may consider civil disobedience." He said that civil disobedience is a political act in the sense that it is an act justified by moral principles which define a conception of civil society and the public good. Burton G. said democratic government must include an agreement to respect differences of opinion concerning justice and right. Civil disobedience is not inconsistent with democracy. When traditional channels of meeting public grievances are incapable of fulfilling legitimate demands, civil disobedience becomes a strategy for the attainment of goods and social justice. Amid the fury of the communalism, genocide, and the market oriented process of social injustice, the Gandhian method of civil disobedience and the Satyagraha is becoming more and more popular in contemporary society. To a superficial observer, it might appear that the concept of civil disobedience and Satyagraha goes against the very synthesis of ideas becoming different faiths and involves a clash of values between the activists of civil disobedience movement and the state. In fact, the Gandhian concept is a means for achieving social synthesis and harmony. It emphasizes dialogues for a dialectical search for truth. T.H. Green, in his lectures on the principles of political obligation, has rightly said, The functions of government are to bring in those conditions of freedom which are conditions of the moral life. If it ceases to serve this function, it loses its claim on our obedience. According to Barker, civil disobedience is virtually within the process of social thought. It is a method of persuasion rather than recourse to force. Here we want to wind up today's lecture. Thank you so much for your attention.